very much indeed. Good evening, everybody. On Tuesday, the 17th of June, 2025, this is the Environment Select Committee of Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I would invite everybody to reflect for 72 seconds to remember those who lost their lives in the tragic fire at Greenwich Tower 8 years ago. Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much indeed. We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Verboven and for lateness from Councillor Benton. Do any colleagues have any declarations of interest? Silence falls. Right, minutes of the previous meeting. We've got two sets of minutes. We've got the main committee meeting on the 18th of March when we had TfL. Any comments on that, or can we agree that one? We agree. Thank you very much. And then we had the short meeting on the 21st of May after the full council meeting. Can we agree that one? Agree. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just sign them. You know that.
Actually, Chair, it's probably not worth adding to it, but it does say in the minutes that under the TfL, increase the frequency to 10 buses. It doesn't say what it is. It means per hour, but it doesn't say that in here.
Well, we've signed that subject to the correction.
Just yeah.
Somebody noted of the minutes.
Page 4.
Yeah, just moving on then beyond the minutes to the various action trackers we've got, and I'll go through them very quickly. So Select Committee Action Tracker, just over the first page, bottom of page 15, Parks and Parks Strategy. We're going to report later on in the year on the Central Strategy, but in the meantime, in March, some members of the committee attended a visit to Gunnsbury Cemetery, and Dora, you were there for the committee, and others will review. I'd like to say a couple of words about that, please.
Sure. This was a very interesting meeting. A very interesting visit to the cemetery led by Monica and one of the other officers. So we have to find that on page. The cemetery was founded in 1829, and it's mostly a normal cemetery, but does have a garden of remembrance for the interment of cremated remains. It is, of course, it's a council cemetery, so it's very well kept. And there are actually some surprising headstones in it. It's not, and memorial stones. And the one that really sticks out literally, because it's a mound, it's a pillar, is the one remembering the Katyn massacre, something that's not perhaps so well known in this country. It was in 1940 when 22,000 Polish officers were murdered by the NKVD on the orders of Stalin. And it really is, I found it touching to see it in a cemetery belonging to this council. There are maybe 20 notable people there of various fields of endeavor. One of them, for example, is a gentleman called Kazimierz Zabat, who was the Prime Minister and President of Poland, the Polish government in exile. And you know that in Exhibition Road, we've got the Polish Centre, which was the seat of that government. It's now just a cultural centre. There are Hindus in it as well. Now, it's getting full. So the question is what to do. And the council has put out a consultation. In fact, all councillors would have received the document a little while ago. And in closing, I would say visit. I mean, there is a car park and it's well worth a visit, surprisingly, but it isn't just any old cemetery. Thank you.
Very much. Very interesting. Any questions for Dory from anybody? Okay, well, thanks very much for that. Just going on to the at the bottom of page 17, I don't have anything on 16. The question for CFL on the platform of Gloucester Road. I can't remember where that came from. It wasn't from the Wards of Ward councillor covering Gloucester Road. You did have a fulsome answer from CFL on that, so that one from the art office complete. And then just going on to the recommendation track, I don't know why that's different from an action track, but anyway, it is 27th of January on the first page. There's a letter apparently sent to the MHCLG at the end of April. Have we seen that letter?
We have not. I've been in contact with the leadership support team, and when the response is received, both letters are going to be circulated to the committee, is what I can tell.
Yeah, I would have thought we all see it, to have seen it as it was issued and wait for the response and see that later on. I think that would be a better way of doing business.
Yeah, I can follow up about that.
Yes, I think that would be far better, please. And that is it, unless anyone else has got anything on the action track, in which case I think we can.
Just a question: if there are actions which are still open, would we update the responsible lead?
It does mention Jem, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think Councillor Vallathis is going to can take his place on the ones that are still open. Pages 2 and 19 and 21, I think Jem's mentioned joining us. Yes. And all his officers are doing the job for them. They're not in. Good. Shall we move on to 94 and talk about Carnival? Who's going to come up? Terry, which is in the opening. We got apologies from Councillor Terry Smith, but I can say again. Okay, well, would you like to introduce your report then, please, Mary?
Yeah, firstly, apologies from Councillor Smith. Just sending his apologies and I mentioned that we're about to be here today, sort through the report. But the report is kind of broken down into kind of two areas. So it's just to give some background around Notting Hill Carnival as an event and the kind of functions and responsibilities that the council has in delivering Notting Hill Carnival. And then the second part is an overview of the finances, but mainly from a council perspective and what we contribute towards the delivery of Carnival as well. So first section really sets out all the detailed planning that goes into Carnival in advance, and it is a cross-council effort. Most teams are either directly involved or certainly impacted by Carnival. It's the biggest street festival in Europe, maybe the second biggest in the world. Numbers differ, but sometimes it's quoted up to 2 million attend over the weekend. So it's a huge, complex event and of significant cultural event as well. From a council perspective, we kind of have an overview from like a gold command structure, command and control structure. I'm gold this year for Carnival, then we have our silvers and we have our bronze teams, which mainly consist of enforcement officers. There's about 100 officers that work Carnival over the weekend and a significant amount input throughout the year as well. And it is becoming a much more year-round activity. And it is becoming really embedded in the way that the council operates. And I think it's a really good example of how the council does cooperate and kind of breaks down some of those silo boundaries. So from an operations perspective, it's working well this year. We've got our internal kind of governance, but then there's a wider governance around how Carnival's operated because there's a lot of strategic partners involved. We've got something called an LOSPG, which is our Licensing, Operations, Safety and Partnership Group. And that's kind of the safety advisory group, which all big events have. And that's chaired by Westminster. And that looks at kind of the tactical operational side of things. That meets monthly and has a number of work, different subgroups attached. There's one around kind of crowd management. There's one around security. There's one around transport. There's various different groups around that. There's a strategic partners group, which I chair, and that's looking at the kind of longer term future of Carnival. And as it says in the report, what we try to do is work with the strategic partners to develop a 5-year plan for Carnival and make it more financially sustainable. At the moment, resources are really tight for such a big event. You go on to that a bit more. We can talk about the finances, but we have we meet weekly at the moment to talk through the funding of Carnival and how we can actually meet the resources required. And then there's a goal group and a funders group as well. And the goal group is looking at strategic, very high level issues across London, but also on Notting Hill Carnival. And the funders group, which Maxine and Stuart Lofton and Westminster sit on, along with the GLA, they're looking at that very high level funding and that interaction with government as well, which is taking place at the moment. From a funding perspective, the council contributes towards the delivery of Carnival. It's really important to remember it's not a council event, it is a community event. There is an organiser called Notting Hill Carnival Limited. Both Westminster and ourselves give a delivery grant to the organiser, and the GLA also supports the organiser with a grant for stewards. Alongside that, the council has its own costs associated with running Carnival. So we've got clean-up, we've got all the staff that work Carnival. There's various things around like toilets and things like that as well. So overall, we have just over £1 million expenditure on Carnival. That includes the delivery grant as well. We have about £300,000 income from street trading. So kind of net spend or net expenditure of around 700k. There is a kind of every year it seems to increase as well as the kind of event gets more complicated as well. And from the review side, from last year's Carnival, as part of the strategic partners group, we did basically say, look, we need to really do a strategic overview of how Carnival is funded and what resource it does need in order to be as safe and spectacular as possible. That resulted in a strategic review around crowd safety and crowd dynamics, which is still underway. But there is a number of recommendations that have been produced out of that report for delivery this year, if resources can be found. There's a request has gone into central government for funding, and there is a deadline this week been set to see whether that can be funded. The GLA are leading those discussions, and it's kind of positive at the moment. It's not a no, but there isn't a concrete commitment at this stage either. So they are live discussions. So we are hopeful that will be secured. We've got a planning meeting this Thursday to really look at this year's event based on the funding that is available as well. So from a council perspective, we've kind of reached the ceiling around contribution that we can make, unless it's extremely necessary for safety. There has been an increase in resourcing for a number of years now, and just aware of the financial situation the council has. There does have to be a ceiling on that, and we're easily there on that. So, but just to reassure you, I would have liked to come today with some good news that we have managed to secure the additional funding, but those discussions are still ongoing.
Well, we always like good news when you come to bring it. We'll settle for what you have been able to to brief us on and ask us some questions. I'll go around the room to my left. Sam, want to start with your question?
Yes, so I had two questions, one about operational risk and testing it, and the second about how Westminster, because I think some of the streets of Westminster, how they contribute or work with us on costs, for example, on rubbish, which I think we're involved in the clearing of it on behalf of them. So that's the second question, quite simply. The first question is particularly for gold and silver for emergency response. How often is the pool tree or the cascade tested? Because as you'll know, being involved in it, people need to feel familiar with knowing that they have to pick up a call and pass on a particular message. So I presume there's a regular test.
Yeah, so resilience team do the testing around the kind of gold and silver rota on a normal basis. So as we know, there is the gold and silver that's on a weekly rota. So I'm actually gold at the moment for the council, and that's tested on a regular basis. We have a separate gold and silver for Carnival, because we feel it's such a significant event. So it really is about just overseeing that event. And again, I'm on site, Suzelle's on site as well. So we're actually there hands-on and working the whole time. So they're constantly tested. With Carnival as well, it is so important to do a lot of the kind of tabletop exercises as well as that scenario testing. So we work with the Met Police at their Hydra facility, at their Hendon Training College, and we have a day there with all the strategic partners, and they put so many different scenarios to us, and it's really interactive with news and kind of actors and stuff coming in. So it's an amazing facility they have, and every year we kind of test different scenarios, and yeah, they chuck a lot at us basically. And then we also do a tabletop exercise at the event liaison team, which is the event liaison base, which is set up at Kensington Academy. So we had a day there where we set up as the event liaison team would be. All the partners come along, and again we test out different scenarios over that day, and there's kind of lessons learned from that. So we do a lot of testing and making sure that do as much as possible. We have the Beck on standby here as well. In terms of Westminster, so the footprint for Carnival is divided up. So about 75% RBKC and 25% Westminster. Westminster do their own waste collection, so Veolia do that for Westminster, and Suez obviously do ours. They do contribute towards the delivery grant. I think this year it's around 225,000. We're contributing about 335. So they contribute possibly more per metre squared, but overall it's they certainly contribute their fair share. Yeah.
Okay, you go to Laura.
Okay, so you mentioned a bit about the debrief and the workshop afterwards.
Yeah.
So what do you think, or what was the sort of calculated that was missing from the pot and services? That's kind of the first bit, and then the second bit. And how is it calculated as well? And then also, I know you mentioned that you, GLA, are in discussion with central government, but what is that figure? And I already know now, you say next week, we'll know. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully this week. So the strategic review identified a number of areas of improvement that can be made around crowd safety and crowd dynamics. In particular, that's the focus. It was looking at the really busy areas of Carnival. We all know it gets super busy. Some of the recommendations ranged from quite simple stuff like more stewards, and there's obviously a price tag attached to that. Then there's stuff around better wayfinding, so better signage on site, better communications, saying like the social media presence of Carnival Goes is actually very low compared to what it should be for that kind of demographic. So it's not about just promoting Carnival, it's about promoting safety messages through social media as well, so people know in advance where the best stations are, the routes to take, various things like that. If something happened on the day as well, then again you can use social media things like that as well. Better CCTV and more CCTV, and yeah, various things like that as well. And the biggest kind of recommendation was more resource for the organizer in terms of a crowd management team. They're a really small organisation to deliver such a big event, and they do a fantastic job. And no one's questioning that. It's just the size of their organisation. It needs to grow in order to really successfully manage that event, and especially with all the scrutiny in the crowds. So the figures, there's a maximum figure of around 2 million been identified for the recommendations. That has been kind of reduced this year because we don't need 4 years figure, but that's the kind of request that kind of figure's gone into central government as a request.
Thank you. Also, on event monitoring, there was just one about sort of all the green toilet sites, and then the correct number, and if they're not there, what do you do about that? How do you actually do that?
Toilets are a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, and we've had separate community meetings this year, and there was a lot of improvements last year, and a lot of positive feedback, but toilets is one of those areas where we've still got quite a way to go. And we have invested more in toilets this year. We've got additional sites, so we've expanded the number of toilets in the existing sites. And we've worked with partners as well, so Westway Trust now under the canopy on Portobello Road, they're having kind of a toilet area which is fenced off, and more toilets there, so there's about 60 extra toilets going there. We put toilets on the main routes out of Carnival as well, because that was the feedback from residents that people were either needed a toilet before they got to Carnival or leaving Carnival. So we kind of put some additional toilets there. So we're looking at growing that every year. Ultimately, we want the organizer to take on the toilets, as you would expect for most events, but again, it's kind of step-by-step approach in terms of funding. So yeah, that's the answer.
Okay, just one more, if I may, Chair. So also with the cleanup, you do cleanup every night after Carnival.
Yeah.
At what time and how long does it take?
Yeah, good question. So Suez oversee the cleanup. They have all their crews. They have over 30 vehicles in the area. It really depends on when it's safe to start. So it relies on the police allowing the vehicles in to kind of have the ring of steel around the footprint. So as soon as the police allow the vehicles in, and we do work very closely with the police. We have a person based down in Lambeth, which is the police's headquarters for Carnival, just to liaise with them so we can have direct contact and say, please let us in. It usually takes a good kind of 8 hours each shift, and then they try and get out by the morning. So it starts Saturday with Panorama and then goes all the way through to Tuesday morning. Contractually, we tell Suez that they have until Friday morning to make the whole of North Kensington look good again, and that's removing all the litter, jet washing as well. After that Friday morning, then we do kind of start reporting issues if there are issues. Until then, we found it more productive if we just let them get on and use their own method to kind of clear up the area rather than just reporting different areas. Just slows things down.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, just two actually beautifully segued along this question, which we touched on the other day. All asked about sewer.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, they weren't providing a year or two ago. There was the different contract for cleanup and Carnival.
It was Suez have always done the cleanup for however long they've been in Carnival. It wasn't part of the main contract.
That's my question. So it's
2021.
and now it is, and now it's part of the. So and is that something that's well, I mean, I will say that last year, reports generally was much better than the previous year. Does that reflect the change? And really, like, how does that reflect, like, in terms of just, is it actually saving money doing it that way? I've doing a better job. Do the reports reflect the change?
2021, always a variation order. So Suez used to put in an extra cost for the cleaning of Carnival, which seems silly considering they were doing it every year. So we've merged it into the tender spec for 2021 contract renewal. And as a result of that, we added other stuff as well, but it came in, I think, 1.6 million cheaper.
Okay,
So we went to open tender, but it came in cheaper.
but this was 2021. So what was the difference between? I mean, I feel that there was a big difference from last year compared to the previous maybe 2 years. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Would
The operation wise, it doesn't change that much. It is impacted a little bit by the weather, and there are certain areas where sometimes traders and stuff make a complete mess, and it does become a bit of a nightmare. 2 years ago, we had a nightmare with the NOS canisters, and they got to be collected by hand, and it really slowed down operations because you can't put them in the back of the lorry. So they had to sift through all the litter, take them out, collect them by hand. We had over 6 skips of canisters.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
I almost would have expected more. I just feel like I'm just wading through.
Yeah. And well, the canisters have got bigger, so the problem's still there, but because it used to be the tiny little silver ones, and now it's big industrial ones.
Okay, good. Great, thank you. And just one other, it's sort of a broader question, but when we're talking about partner, I mean, given the amount of sort of sponsorship that we get in Carnival, that like, you know, sound systems and so forth get, I do wonder if any thoughts being given to how to sort of essentially extend those sorts of, or it's about making independent, but you know, to actually help us provide our services in order, because as far as I'm concerned, the alternative would be actually something there's also outside for in some quarters, which is to actually bring the whole thing a little bit back into more of a local event. But given it is the scale that it is and has the sponsorship that it does, is there a way of maybe looking to broaden that sort of involvement?
It's a really good question, and it's definitely on the to-do list. And the event organisers are getting better at sponsorship. Certainly during lockdown, they secured a huge amount of sponsorship to do stuff online. I think the problem with Carnival is it's sometimes quite polarised views of Carnival. Some people love it, some people don't. And I think the big brands get a little bit nervous sometimes around Carnival, and especially if there's some serious crime or something that is linked to Carnival somehow, even though it's not directly happened to Carnival. I think it's just getting over that. We've tried to change the narrative around Carnival to give it the positive community event that it is, and there's a huge amount of really good work goes on, but it just does get tarnished sometimes by some of the more negative stories that happen.
I mean, my only just, you know, response to that would be, I mean, isn't that a way of improving, you know, public relations with carnivals to say, well, actually, if you help us deliver what we do, and it's safe to skin or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. Before I go to Dory, I'm just going to follow up on that last question, because the income, 285k income from street trading. I mean, that's quite, considering there's 2 million people on the streets over 2 days, that's quite a small portion there. I mean, there must be a way of
There is, so
increasing the amount of money that we collect from them, from sponsors.
we are looking at that. So that 285 income is based on the number of street trading licenses we issue. So we charge per square metre. For those, it's around £60 square metre, which all street trading licenses got to be a cost recovery model. So it's really hard to put in a huge cost, but there is possibly extra expenses possibly we could put there. It's trying to tie it into linking it directly to street trading, so they do contribute towards the clean up, they contribute towards the toilets already. So we've got quite a complex breakdown of how those figures arrive. We are looking at more stalls as well, but we just got to be careful around making things too busy in Carnival, because you think, oh, I'll just put a stall here or I'll put a stall there. It has impacts on other things as well. So you just got to do it in partnership with councillors, with partners.
And I mean, there's a long discussion to be had there, but
I agree. I think there is the sponsorship discussion definitely needs to take place, but we need to crack the safety side.
Let's bring Dorian.
Thanks very much. I've got some non-finance questions and a finance question. First of all, just what is Hydra?
Hydra is, it's a Greek god, apparently.
It's got lots of tentacles.
Yeah. So Hydra is it's a kind of a scenario testing software and operations room, I suppose police have in their Hendon facility, and it allows you to break up into groups, have loads of different scenarios, and it's very interactive, and it's a really good. I think we're down there in July.
Visions of some creature. Thanks. Also, I wanted to say that you and your team do a great job. I mean, I've been in it several times and see what you do. So I have to commend you all for managing this huge operation. And talk about cleanup. What about Westminster City Council? I know it's not our borough, but it's right next door. And because they have a different contractor.
Yeah.
And we've had some issues in Cambridge Ward on just street cleaning. And well, you know what happened? The contract got changed. We took stuff in house. But what's the position with Westminster? Is there any coordination about things like that?
So Veolia is the contractor for Westminster,
Yeah.
and they're responsible for their streets. There are certain streets which have kind of and there's an agreement on who does what street, so that it's not like Suez do half a street and Veolia does half a street. It's either Suez do all the street or Veolia does all the street. So there's a mutual agreement that we have.
So I hope that they clean up properly, because we know what happened in Cambridge Ward. It wasn't very good.
Okay, yeah. The Veolia
I'm
are
talking
good at that as well.
about it. Yeah. Okay.
And they've got a lot of experience, obviously, with big events in London.
True. Yes. I'm wondering, in the crowd management and so on, managing the whole thing.
Yeah.
What effect, if any, will the new HVM hostile vehicle management measures, or hostile measures have on managing the carnival, if any?
Are these the ones on Brookfellow Road?
On the Road, yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the centre, one of the centres of the carnival.
It is, and we've got to investigate that. The actual, all that will be in operation is the concrete blocks that are being talked about.
Yeah.
The H-stops won't be in operation,
That's right.
because the whole area is kind of locked down anyway. So there's a bigger ring of steel with major hostile vehicle measures across all the entry points. So don't anticipate those being a massive issue on Portobello Road. And we go out and do a visual assessment once they're in, just to make sure that if we need to remove one or two, then so be it. But the intention is that it should be
The
fine.
police will have an input. I mean, they've
Yeah.
been involved for a long time.
Yeah,
So
it's just more whether it does get busy in certain parts of Portobello Road, and it's just making sure they don't become a trip hazard or kind of block the footfall.
Yeah. Thanks. Now, coming to the financial questions. First of all, on the table, the detail, it says under items, contractors, £135,000.
Yeah.
Cost. For what? Is that for toilets or industrial or what?
Yes, that's toilets.
Okay. It's not part of the cleanup, just the toilets.
It's not toilet.
Okay, thanks. Then I was trying to understand somehow how these numbers tie up. You mentioned the organizer receives £1 million from Greater London, so that's completely separate from the numbers that you've got in the tape. And all the other numbers you mentioned,
Yeah,
whoever wrote it.
this is strategic partners. So there's the GLA, the Metropolitan Police, Westminster, and ourselves. The GLA fund the stewarding, so they have a direct contract with
Right,
the organizer, and that's just over £1 million.
okay, right, that's independent. Okay, and then what does trip mean? 40,000.
Sorry, yeah, that's we always do kind of a trip away for vulnerable residents. So it's with Age UK.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's away weekends, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yes, in fact, I think I've even nominated somebody or helped somebody get into one of those ones. Okay, and then finally, just to add things up in the table. So this total comes to 981,000.
Yeah.
And we get this income, so net 630. And so, but we also give a grant, don't we give a separate grant to the organizer?
Yeah, so the delivery,
300,000.
335, which is
I'm too.
like
Pardon?
understaffed costs.
Oh, that's delivery grant. Oh, yeah, okay. And that's, okay, that's how we get to it. And that is, was that it? Because I remember originally when the current organizer was set, it was a 1-year trial followed by a 3-year contract, which I think started before COVID.
Yeah,
So they,
so we extended it by 2 years and now we're just having an annual rolling program.
because he's considered to be reasonably good. I think he is actually.
They're really good. They're a fantastic organizer. It's a super challenging job. So what they do is,
I think that's it. Thanks very much. Well,
Oh, thank you, Chair. Is it safe to say overall the carnival is not a money-making exercise? So we're out of pocket.
that's very, very safe to say.
How much out of pocket
It's around 700,000
every year?
every year. Yeah.
And so going back to what Toby said, have we considered the sponsorship so that maybe they can carry that burden? And how likely is that to happen in the future?
It's a really good question, and that is certainly something we picked up with that kind of 5-year vision. It's something we want the event organizer to really focus on. The problem, they do have sponsorship for like events in Emsley Hornimans, the Red Bull used to sponsor that. They get quite a few of their bars and stuff sponsored, so they do get some income. There used to be kind of Virgin used to sponsor it, there used to be Lilt, various other corporate companies did sponsor that. So there is potential for that. I think one of the blockers at the moment is going back to the crowd safety point of view. I think overall there has been a drop off in corporate sponsorship, I think, across the board. And people are getting, or companies are very, very select around what they want to sponsor. And I think companies are interested, but I think it's just that reassurance and that positive message. And that's what we're working on over the next few years.
Because I live in the borough for 34 years, and every year there is a crime in Carnival. Every year there is a serious crime, not just mugging and or something like that. And it kind of boggles me that we never really look at that. It seems like we never looked at that seriously to mitigate it, because that's the reason why sponsors don't want to put their name to Carnival, because it's synonymous with stabbing, killing, injuring, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's certain people that turn up to Carnival and kind of ruin it for the vast majority. 99.9% of people turn up to Carnival for a good time and they want to enjoy themselves. And there's some fantastic community groups and stuff involved. There is crime and there is some serious crime that takes place. The crime levels are comparable with kind of other large scale events, if not lower as well. And there is, like Glastonbury is a high.
Very different anyway, because it's just a closed field. I mean, it's
Yeah.
huge, but it's.
Well, if you
But
carry
it
on
is-
your questions.
But
please,
but
so
is
that we have a general discussion.
but is that sorry, is the issue the clientele, the environment, or the geography of the, so what is the issue? Because it must, I've been thinking about it, must be something, one or two things are really the reason for having crime regularly every year.
Yeah, I think it's a really complex picture, and I don't think there is a easy answer. And I know all the partners, and certainly the police, are looking at addressing that. There's wider issues across the country, like night crime and stuff like that. And Carnival does become a victim of night crime, to be fair. It's not people don't take a night to Carnival for they want to be safe and stuff like that. But there's night crime elsewhere in the country. So I think it's a really hard one to solve, and Carnival unfortunately does get tarnished with a bad reputation like that as well. There are some tragic events that happen, and no one wants that. I mean, crowd safety and people's safety is key, and as partners we are working really hard to ensure that does happen. And we certainly, there's a lot more additional measures going in this year. But until that gets fully resolved, then it's going to be hard to get the big sponsorship deals that we want.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll start my questions with a point of detail, if I may. And Terry, you might not be able to answer this, but maybe it's one for Lucy. So on page 29, your table, you say the net cost is 631k. But in the next paper, which is yours, Terry, on page 40, and it's about 10 lines from the bottom, Notting Hill Carnival net cost 715k. So that's not an insignificant difference between, and all the figures across the board there are slightly different as well. So why are the differences?
I didn't prepare the finance to the carnival phase plan, but there are a number of things that go into the 25-26 budget that perhaps aren't reflected in the 24-25 figures, and that largely inflation, things like staffing and the contracts for the toilet provision and water costs. There are also likely other sort of adjustments to budgets going forward. Now, of course, we have to put some extra budget into that and those growing for the additional building costs.
So are we saying that the page 29 is an historic figure, and a more accurate figure would be page 40, and without Terry, you said about 700,000 earlier.
Yeah, the approved budget is 715, although there's obviously been a subsequent key decision report to agree an additional carnival delivery grant payment this year, which will increase.
How much is that?
That's the 335.
So that's on top of the net 715. So
Yes, and there's cost this year to be 950.
the net cost is 950. That's significantly more than the 630 that we've got in this paper then. Okay. So I think that brings me on to my bigger question, which is, I mean, the reason we're having this paper tonight, and it's obviously Notting Hill Carnival's a very important and significant event in the borough's calendar. So of course we're going to look at it. But our this committee, probably with almost none of these members on it, about 18 months ago, asked the question, what are you doing to secure fairer funding? So that's why we're specifically here tonight. And for the record, you did mention that you were hoping for good news, Harry, and we were hoping for good news. But could you do a slightly more specific outline of who's the borough written to, what ministers have you engaged, what meetings have you had, and line by line, to outline what efforts you've made to get to the stage that you're at the moment, please, and take it back to where you want to, because I think we do need to put this on the public record that you are working hard on this.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, if I go back to the review stage, so back in October, we had a full day where the strategic partners came together and outlined exactly kind of a 5-year vision, and the organisers kind of leading on that, facilitated that. We had an external facilitator come in and kind of plan out what a safe, spectacular carnival would look like, and funding was the key issue there. What we kind of stated was that we kind of go along every year, and there's always this growth in need as costs go up for carnival, it gets more and more complex. So there was an action plan developed, and the main action from that was really to commission the strategic review to place. So we produced a brief for the strategic review, which the organisers ended up commissioning, and that's got some experts in to look at kind of cloud safety, cloud dynamics, and looking at how we can really address those points. And it was a really detailed study, and there's costed recommendations for all of those. But there was a recognition at the very beginning that all the strategic partners involved had already invested their kind of limit in carnival. So this was trying to put a proposal together for central government to say, look, this is what carnival needs to operate safer moving forward. And that's where we've been working on over the last kind of few months. It's working up those proposals, reviewing those proposals, making sure the costings are okay. There's been a funders group as well that's been set up with Maxim and the chief execs and the GLA. There's been a number of meetings between the GLA and central government as well, which as a council we fed into. We wrote to the Home Office directly requesting funding. The latest letter went this week, just to say we're aware that there is discussions. We fully support, well, we all say the Carnival, we really would appreciate the additional funding for that. The organisers and ourselves, the Royal Strategic Partners, wrote to Lisa Nandy in the DCMS. That's happened twice now as well. There's been meetings directly with the police minister as well, a number of times as well. So there's been a lot of discussions going on. I'm on the phone sort of daily with the GLA, chasing stuff and seeing the additional lobbying and stuff that can take place as well. So we've gone through the MP as well, and then obviously there's work in the background to say, okay, what happens if additional funding doesn't become available? What those recommendations can be implemented without additional resource, where it's just tweaking things around. They've all been done. There's other recommendations that have been prioritised, and we're kind of ready to go if we get the funding this week. So there's kind of recruitment of the crowd management team. These are all really time sensitive recommendations, which you can't wait until kind of any later than the end of this month to actually give the event organisers the opportunity to implement them. So we've got staff lined up, ready to be this crowd management team if need be. So the recruitment process has all been done. People are kind of on standby for that, and then all the IT and stuff, everything's been looked at, ready to go, so that we can hit the green button and start implementing. So we've kind of planned on the funding will be available. If not for this kind of, well, then it's definitely all the prep work for next year. So there's been a huge amount of work behind the scenes. And I meet weekly now with the strategic partners to go through kind of the risk review as well, to say, okay, if this recommendation can't be delivered, what's the implications of that? Is there any other measure that we can put in? Can we reduce costs? And we looked at the whole value engineering piece as well. So yeah, there's an awful lot of work that's been done.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the efforts that you're putting into it. And you say you've written to a number of ministers there. Have we had responses from the ministers, or has that gone into the black hole in Whitehall and not come out?
Lisa Nandy has responded to the organisers and made some positive contribution, I think. We're still awaiting the response from the Home Office, I believe.
Right. So we'll hope for the best with that, which is all we can.
Yeah, I think we only sent a follow-up letter this week, so just to.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll just one other question I wanted to ask about, and I think it's quite early in the paper you talk about a sustainable carnival and also sustainability. Are there any efforts, or to what extent are there efforts to try and reduce the amount of rubbish that gets thrown on the street? Is there anything you've done or could do to emphasise not leaving people not living?
It's a really good. So sustainability in that context, I suppose, refers to two things. It's financially sustainable, and that's the sponsorship piece, but also environmental, because the event has a huge environmental footprint. So the good news is that 30% of the waste gets recycled anyway. So we take it to what's called a dirty MRF, mixed recycling facility. So all the waste goes through there, and they pick out the things that can be recycled. We have previously had food waste for traders, and we've had Suez and a number of private companies as well, kind of doing reuse and plastic recycling as well. It kind of just as a tip of the iceberg, to be fair, there's so much waste that is produced. So the event organisers are being really good. They're trying to get electric vehicles on board, because at the moment we use kind of diesel vehicles. It's just trying to get agreement with the fire brigade around vehicle safety. And fire safety for that. So they're looking at that. All the toilet waste gets recycled and is turned into field fertilizer as well. So we are trying to do do our bit there. But I agree. I think we're trying to encourage less waste, and there is kind of things around reusable glasses and drinks containers and things like that as well. So we are definitely trying to encourage kind of store holders and stuff to do that. It's really hard in the bit. I can't.
Well, sure. And thank you very much for your efforts on that. And I think with the costs approaching a net million, I think with this latest one, I mean, we're now talking about a percentage point on or off council tax. So we're now up at that kind of level. So it is very significant. I think in terms of recommendations, if the committee's happy, I think we would like to hear the outcome of the lobbying that you've been doing, please, Terry. So have an response by the end of middle of July, whatever your deadline is. This month. Right, we need it. So I think in terms of our focuses as a select committee, maybe by the next time we meet, it's be good to have a response from you, getting what the outcome was, and there's a few lines, an email which our committee officers can share. And maybe as a bit of encouragement, because a few of us talked about angles for sponsorship, maybe we could have a bit more of a study on that, and if not before this year's carnival, then it's clearly a longer term project. But as a means of encouraging you, we recommend that you explore further the opportunities for sponsorship for the carnival, and see what we can get out of it. Obviously, that will depend partly on the answer you get from the ministers as well. No, definitely. Very much. I'm sure James can go some working on that in due course. But thank you very much indeed for presenting the paper. Good luck with this year's presents as well. Questions? I think we're going to move on to the next paper. Okay, so invite the member. That's the first time you've appeared before the committee in your renewed old role, but back in your old role with a slightly different title, Johnny. So congratulations, welcome back.
No, it's good to be back. I won't say too much about paper other than that I think it's very helpful to see the statutory and non-statutory budgets laid out like this. I know it's something that you asked for several times at OSC in the past, and obviously here at ESC too. But I think it's a useful lens through which to look at how we can meet the budget challenge ahead. Obviously, there's a large gap in terms of the next year. Looking at where we have to spend money and where we want to spend money is probably quite a good place to start. So that's all I would add, but I don't know whether officers want to.
Sure, or both can have a chance to say something.
Yes, so thank you for kind of opportunity to present the paper. I think it's laid out in there. We try to be as transparent as possible. But we budget around £81.7 million to provide neighbourhood services. And our income is about 83.7. So that's a good return for the council. What we believe are really good levels of services. And we're particularly proud of our parks, our highways, amongst the best in London, and our waste collection and street cleansing are kind of the standard is what we'd expect from Royal Borough of Kensington Chelsea, like we're a rural borough, and to deliver kind of a net positive income is excellent. In terms of our income sourcing, which is going to be probably part of your key lines of inquiry, it's worth noting that some are ring fenced. So there's some income we get, for example, around commercial waste collection, which can be spent on a number of things. But parking income, our markets income from the street trading account, and some of our enforcement income is ring fenced. They can only be paid if spent on those services. The parking income in particular is one that you'd be interested in, and that has to be spent on highways and transport, accessory fares, and environmental related initiatives. In terms of our statutory services, that's quite clear. What's less clear is some of them say we have to provide a service like street cleansing, but there are always questions around to what extent we deliver those services. And whilst we put the figures there, you may have questions for us around the service we provide. And that's the same for those services that are kind of a mixture of statutory and non-statutory. So some of them provide income as well. And then there are non-statutory services. Some of those are arts and culture. Parks, be surprised to hear it's non-statutory. And their questions you'll ask in the meeting. We have got Moira, Andrew and Terry here as well. So if there are any detailed questions about the services, then they can always provide support. And Lucy's here with the detailed budget information. But we've just intended to be fully transparent. The information's there. We welcome any questions. And on those more complicated areas, we can also go away and come back. Because many of our costs can't be split in half, for example. If you halve our frequency for a service, because of fixed costs, sometimes you reduce the cost by 20 to 30%. So we can go back way more detail up. So is that okay, Chip?
That's very helpful, and thank you very much for bringing along the big guns, all the directors, to set out your sections as required. And Lucy, did you want to add anything from the finance point of view?
No, I think those captured it as well, but you know, it's really important to highlight our biggest source of income is from parking, which is heavily legislated in terms of what we can spend that on. And so council obviously makes sort of strenuous efforts to apply that against revenue budgets where we possibly can, in order that it alleviates pressure on the general fund where we are constrained by legislation.
Of course, and we do appreciate that as an executive directorate, you are the good guys, in that you're net positive financially for the council. Obviously, that net could be bigger, cost could be lower, income could be higher, perhaps. But yeah, we can explore those.
So the outturn hasn't been published this year, but we've managed to meet our budget and exceed that. At the moment, the original outturn is very good. It's not quite double-digit millions, but it's not too far off. But,
That is at the outturn for last year, or the
for last year, yeah.
But no, you said because we're not really at the end of the first quarter yet.
So for last year, that is.
Okay, but that's
And it's worth just saying the money we can't spend on parking or attribute general fund revenue goes into the parking reserve, and that's often used for capital scheme.
great. Well, let's go around the committee. We'll go around the other way. Start with Walla, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Usually financial papers are very boring to me, but this is very interesting to me. So thank you so much. And then I have two small questions. One on parking. So you said the parking funds are ring fenced, so it have to be spent. Do you get to a point where you feel you have to spend it, or does it comfortably go where it needs to go?
So
We don't have to spend it. It just goes into the parking reserve if we.
So you can do that. So
Yeah.
you can keep it in reserve and use it later on.
Yeah,
That's-
we can make transfers and stuff.
Okay, so that
So
makes,
for at the moment, so I mean, it's a choice to spend the money, so I'm parking it, and not all of it, some of our highway services are non-statutory, so they're choices.
Mhm.
Things like discretionary fares we'd always pay for, because those services, the burden would fall on the general fund, which you want to do. At the moment, we can't spend enough parking income to attribute to services, so it creates a surplus every year that goes into the parking reserve. But
okay.
even that surplus can still only be spent on the services that are in scope. So generally, they tend to be highways projects, but they can also be parks projects. And we also keep a minimum level, because in future years, if there is an economic shock or we had COVID, it allows us to smooth any issues in future years as well.
So that's what I was alluding to is, do you get enough reserve that you feel you have to put it somewhere? Because sometimes when you save, you feel like you have to spend. And do you have that, or do you don't have that issue? You just said.
No, so yes, so we have more parking income that we can spend. We do keep a minimum level. So at the moment, the advice from finance would keep £5 million reserve in there, and that will allow us to weather any shocks. And that was based on kind of the COVID experience. We did get the government support with income levels, but that would allow us to see any future issues.
Yeah.
So a good example would be if there was a recession, say,
Yeah.
we might see slightly less paid for parking in shopping areas or areas like that. So we do have a level, and we have to put power.
And you can get penalized for having
No,
surplus.
No,
Okay,
no, we
yeah.
don't.
The other thing I was gonna ask is, on planning, the money you collect, do you collect money for, fines? And do you get enough revenue from that if you do? I mean, do you, from when people do wrong things, for instance, do you penalize them by fining them? Or it's just,
So within planning, there's not really much fine income. So in occasions we prosecute people, but prosecution is in court. We only get our costs. So any fine goes to the state. We do get a lot of parking income, also planning income, also land charges income, and building control income. But the council has quite a healthy income target to account for those, and that goes back into funding the service. So on planning, planning is a net cost to the council. So planning in particular doesn't break even. But do you remember the planning, the net cost?
About 5 million.
Yeah, so planning still costs us £5 million, but we do get good planning income. And that doesn't include SIL, for example, which is the money we
it goes
raise.
to the board?
Yes, that's separate, and
Yeah.
that's also a good source of income that the residents and members can use to support projects in their area.
I think
But you don't-
over achieved in the outcome.
Yeah, so
I think it was in surplus as well, modest surplus.
yeah, so in the draft outcome, which we haven't
Yeah.
seen, what planning income did well,
Yeah,
but it's still a net cost to the council.
yeah,
But other authorities, their planning service costs them a lot more than our service.
and they're probably running a deficit.
Yeah, we also have different, because of our borough makeup and historical buildings, we get a lot of planning applications. There's a lot more detailed work around listed building conservation areas. So our planning service does have more costs than some other councils in London.
Thank you.
So enough story. Thanks. But just to check this, you said parks are non-statutory. Does that mean we could just let it go wild if we didn't have the money?
It's bizarre, but
Is that what you're
parks aren't
saying?
actually service, isn't it? Not that we ever, I can imagine members of it want to do.
No, no, but I'm just saying that if
Cambridge
it's
Square,
in
sorry.
case, I'm Croydon's in one of it, but anyway.
Yeah, so some parks, but before they've had no money, the council have either rewilded areas, which is a nice term for allowing them to grow wild.
Weeds.
Or we're really lucky. Holland Park's got its own nursery, we have beautiful planting. Some parks will just mow the grass and hedges. But I'm really proud of our parks in the borough. None of them really flagged and they're doing a great job.
So, just to follow on the parking income surplus, this is a question that just arose from the discussion you're having with my colleague here. I didn't fully understand this. So you're building up a reserve, but can you spend it or not? This is what I don't understand. There's surplus from direct parking, but there are projects onto which you can legitimately spend the money.
Yeah, we can spend it on highways and environmental
Right.
projects.
You just choose to keep a reserve. That's
Yeah,
okay.
and if we don't have enough highways and environmental projects, we can, if we wish, identify new projects that we want to spend it on.
Okay, so there is some flexibility in what you spend.
Yes,
Well, within,
provided it's within the
providing it's,
legislative.
yeah, providing
Yes.
it's within those areas.
That's what I
yes.
mean. It's with, okay.
Highways, it's like welfare transport, custody affairs and environmental, and some parts of the waste collection service, such as recycling and food
Yeah.
waste, also funded by.
Yeah, so there is, what I'm saying is there is flexibility in what you spend
Yes.
on, because I know in some things there's very little flexibility. So really on the financial side, first of all, I must say, I've never seen income written in red before. I don't know how many people really mentioned that in the office, but anyway, the more serious question perhaps is, I didn't understand in looking at the summary table, it says here statutory total of uncontrollable expenditure of 7.7 million. And it says non-statutory total, 3.5 million. And the total says, both totals says 6.1 million. So I don't understand
On
that,
the-
grand total, so I really don't understand.
Table one,
I don't understand the numbers at all.
So this
seven
is
seven
just,
three four 612 equals 17.
that is the non-controllable budget. So we're just
So what-
saying that the uncontrollable element of the budget for both the statutory, non-statutory and those that divert a bit both is the 7.7, the 3.4 and the 6.1, which adds up to the 17.3 million. That is the corporate overhead that is recharged to services and the environment. and labour.
So there are some areas that are fully statutory, and then there are other areas that are not at all statutory, and then both means that a bit of the
Ah,
surface is
so
statutory
that's it.
and a bit isn't.
Right.
So it's broken down into those three categories, and there are the three subtotals.
So that's
about 17.3 million.
Right, so there's a third category, basically,
Yes.
of mixed.
Yes.
So I suppose the question is, if the crunch came, let's hope it never does, but if the crunch came, those 6.1 million would shrink expenditure?
The challenge is,
It's not as binary as that because, you know, like Bo was saying, you have a statutory surface, but the sense to which you deliver it might change. So it's not as binary as saying if our budgets were under pressure, we would just chop all of the non-statutory stuff. It would probably still be a mix because you'd look at the level of service you want to provide.
Right.
There might be things that are non-statutory, like parks, that would nevertheless be pretty close to the bottom of the list of the things that you'd want to cut the service in.
Right.
So,
Now, this I understand. but
Yeah.
It does say both, so it suggests there are some statutory items in there and some non-statutory items.
It's
But you're saying it's
Yes.
not that binary.
well, no, I'm saying whether you would choose to eliminate spend in the both category in the event of a kind of budget shock. It's not binary because it might be that there are non-statutory elements of the both subcategory that you would still want to preserve.
I think it's also worth noting that the thing that's interesting about the services that provide both is there is a net contribution of 32 million to the department. So a lot of these services provide some statutory, service provision, but they also generate income often from non-statutory. So
Also, I'm wondering why not only but why is income only in brackets? That's normally again as a negative. Brackets normally means minus.
yeah, I think we've had this conversation a number of times over the years, but in local authority accounting, income is the credit figure.
It's how it's done in local government.
Is that where that's a local thing? Income is actually a negative thing.
Yes, we're a spending organisation, so that's why income's shown in brackets. I think that you, if I move on now to.
Yeah, thanks. That's it.
Thank you, Chair. I did have just a question about surplus. I think you answered that pretty well. I suppose I did was interested in, I've lost my place, economies of scale. We're talking about, again, this sort of segues on to the last thing about what contracts. So this is just me getting my head around it. I thought part of the point of having a contract with someone like Suez is that they do work on large economies of scale. And I understand benchmarking, identifying areas to improve. I think probably that is one of those things where we do like to, do as well as we can, do better than we might have. So yeah, can you just speak a little bit about that? Because that's what I'm stumbling on. It's the economy of scale, given its contracts and they're very big contracts.
Yeah, so that with economies of scale, there's always and using kind of a single contractor for multiple specialities is the balance between price and quality. So for example, the sewage contract provides economies of scale because it collects waste, does like graffiti and also street cleansing. I've been in places before where street cleansing, for example, is separate to waste and that contract provides that. So you could make an argument and say, why do we have one contractor that provides all of our street cleansing, all of our waste, and all of our parks? But good horticulture, park management, because of the standard we want to maintain in our parks, we use Ida Verde, who are a specialist parks contractor.
Yeah.
So it's just that balance between specialism and also kind of the quality. I would agree with you. Where it's less about quality, then there is a case for aggregating contracts. I think that within environment neighbourhoods, we haven't got a huge number of main contractors. So kind of the big contracts. So your kind of sewage, your waste and cleansing contract. You've got your parking contract. You've got a very specialist Ida Verde who do grounds maintenance. And we've got Conways who do highways. They're quite niche in their area. And we do try to use as larger contracts to cover those areas as much as possible. And as Terry said earlier, we've had some good examples where we've brought off-contract spend into the contract, such as the carnival cleaner, to make sure that we're getting the benefits of the full contract. Because if not, when you go away and do your negotiations on side pieces, you do lose those economies of scale. There is an argument outside of being in the council. Are there other opportunities for us to share contractors? I do think the corporate procurement are looking for that as well. But it's a point well made. But I'm saying we operate at a good level of economies of scale.
No, indeed. I mean, I really mean I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
No, it's a good question. And I mean, there are in other boroughs large detractors who provide everything, but they're not necessarily in the places like RBKC where we're trying to provide really good quality.
Yeah, I mean, given we are obviously locked in the contract, I mean, Suez is what, 28?
24?
8 + 8, so it's 29.
29. Then, I mean, how much, if we are identifying issues there, then, I'm just curious what the next step would be, how you address that within a contract.
Yeah, so because of the length of those contracts, they're very flexible. Terry, do you want to talk a little bit about the flexibility within the contracts?
Yeah. So it's reviewed annually as well. So we've got the AGM next week. With Suez, so we can review the contract. I know there's two of you. It works on different levels. So there's kind of daily meets with the teams, then there's weekly meets with the team managers, then there's a monthly meet with the head of service, and then I have a quarterly partnership board meeting as well. And kind of the whole contract gets reviewed at those meetings in terms of the things that are not working for us and the things not working for Suez, and they get addressed there. At the AGM, we kind of review any changes that we make to the contract.
And your opinion, that works? I'm just asking.
Yeah, it works very well. Suez is a really good contractor. We've got a really good partnership working with them. We've added stuff to the contract, we've taken stuff out. There's been growth items over the last year with extra food waste and stuff that's been added. So yeah, there's flexibility there, and we get kind of value for money. So
Suez was really good recently. We used to do internal contract monitoring, whereas now we get an external company that's doing environmental quality monitoring, and they make sure that the quality of our streets are checked independently. And Matt's recently pushing that as an area, and that's against us NI 195, which is an industry indicator, and they perform.
Yeah, now I want to ask follow-ups, but I think I've used my time fine, and I'm happy to think about this in the future. But thanks for that.
Toby, Laura.
Thanks, Chair. So actually, my question was kind of following up from that. It was, high quality of service, and you say on page 36, 1.19, you could get a lower price deliverable, but it could affect certain services. I was going to say something, Clash, but I think he's answered it. Is there anything else you would add to that, though?
Some services have a direct relationship. So we have officers that undertake street enforcement. So an argument could be made that if we've done less street enforcement, we could pay more waste collections or additional street cleansing activity. There's also the same argument around recycling. So we have a really small recycling team. I talked with Terry earlier. They really prioritise getting our residents to dispose of collect food waste, and the food waste bin has been rolled out, and also recycling. And our food waste has a gate fee, which is per ton of 0 at the moment. Our recycling rate is half of that of our refuse rate. So there are a small number of services that we invest in if we want to invest to save basis. And that's our kind of attempt to, through behavioural change, to reduce our costs.
It's our version of prevention.
Yeah.
But I mean, another example is like our highways maintenance. We have the fewest potholes in the country. We've got some of the nicest paving with all the Yorkstone that we have all over KNC. That's a high cost relative probably to some other places. But if we reduce the cost, there's a pretty good chance we start having potholes and our pavements would crack more. And the reactive maintenance would cost more than the proactive work that we do now.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Also on page 38, you have parking administration. Obviously, parking brings in a lot of, like cars and stuff, bring a lot of money, but that's quite a hefty figure. Are there sort of ways to sort of maybe bring that administration down? Are you looking at new technology or something to kind of
we're bringing in a resident. We've got a chatbot that's helping people hopefully talk to the parking service when they need to.
Yeah.
We're also bringing in Resident Connect. Within the first phase of that, it's going to involve the parking service, which should be over the next couple of weeks. It'll effectively mean over time that you can subscribe for your parking permit and renew it by direct debit, and obviously that saves thousands of hours every year.
Yeah.
Both for residents who would otherwise possibly have to come into the town hall and renew their permits, and also for officers who can either be redeployed within the parking service, or we can invest the money that we save from that into other more targeted areas across the council. So time and money both.
Do you have when it's all up and running, do you have a rough figure of how much that will go down by? Because currently it's 3, 6, 8, 5, roughly.
I know that we had built in £1 million of savings into the MTFS for the Resident Connect programme, but I don't know how much of that was put in just.
No, it hasn't been attributed just to park at the moment.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes. Difficulty is that our parking income has increased a lot over the last couple of years. So how much? How many millions?
About 9 million.
So that 9 million of income has created a huge amount of additional activity. So although we're getting more efficient at the moment, we're broadly delivering the same amount of activity for £9 million more income. So we are becoming more efficient. But yeah, as our parking income is increased, there's more PCNs, more challenges, more administration. But the Resident Connect should provide much better service for our residents. It's be cheaper. And the parking chatbot it's just started, it's rolled out, and if you can go online, you can see it, and it seems to be working quite well. We are going to review that and aid parking technology, make sure we do what should be good.
Thank you.
I'll just stick with Laura for the moment.
So, just one, maybe it's just a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. On rule 34, high risk buildings, you mentioned, what does that mean? What is a high risk building? Basically on 1.10, so dangerous structure service responding to over 60 incidents a year. The service also deals with over 70 high risk building.
So that's high rise building, so that's building control service.
Okay.
So we have a duty to inspect them and obviously the building controls.
Thank you. I know it's.
Thanks.
Was it high risk or high rise?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, right.
Shall we, let's move on, Sam, your.
Yes, a very good question. Just on appendix 1, detailed budget breakdown. Does finance team look at these sorts of figures and challenge them or ask why there isn't more income? And does the finance team or does your team have any sort of comparable figures or ratios between cost and expense from Westminster or London averages that you could say we're doing better or we're doing worse than equivalent councils?
Yeah, so I think if I could take 3.2, you'll ask one about your involvement and how you challenge us and the work that goes in.
Think that we challenge the directors of this portfolio relentlessly.
You just want to, this sort of line by line, half of our film, we've each picked out some elements. We would have thought we make more money out of this, but we're not the experts. We don't have any data to throw back. But that's why the comparable point or Westminster, what their rates look like, and are we doing better or worse than London average?
So I don't have that data to hand, but part of the role of the finance business partnering teams and those finance business partner for each department within the directorate is to work with them to understand where there might be opportunities to make savings, there might be ways, both potential efficiencies, and also to obviously support services that are unavoidable or desirable sort of growth items into the capacity of this budget. Services themselves undertake quite a lot of benchmarking, so although there is comparable data that's available and the council has some subscriptions to some of that data and some of it's just publicly available, such as the revenue outturn data. With all benchmarking, there's a bit of an apples and pears comparison, criticism that often comes in. So a lot of benchmarking is undertaken more locally by teams that are in the
So on the first point, I mean, Lucy and the finance team are kind of really embedded in our services and quite a lot of challenge. And just as part of the budget setting process, we do have a budget gap and we're continually challenged to try and squeeze more out appropriately, because there's a balance between residents delivering services and kind of being charged, and we all accept that. On benchmarking, I think we deliver an excellent level of service. I truly believe that. It's fair to say there are areas where we do cost a bit more than other boroughs, and that's for a number of reasons. So one of those is the size of the borough. So we are the smallest borough in London, one of the smallest in the UK. And when you benchmark, you may look at kind of per head of population. Actually, we have a massive visitor economy as well. So we're also paying for residents to use our streets who are coming to the busiest museums in the country, if not Europe. And when you do the benchmarking, as earlier said, it is that kind of per head expenditure versus our kind of look for. Also, in a smaller borough, we still provide the same number of services. So you can only cut people so many ways. So you do need a certain number of statutory officers. And the fact is that unless you share services or they work on different arrangements, you do get higher costs. And there is the point we talked about before, whereas we have made or members have made in a number of occasions, conscious choices around our service delivery. So we have said we want to have best streets, we have the cleanliness and quality, the best parks, and I mean our waste collection service. I think we're unrolled in London in terms of frequency and quality, and that's a positive choice, I think. But it is a fair question, and we are more expensive, but often it's because we've made the choice.
Yeah, but I think lead members do ask to see line by line in terms of departments. In the past, I haven't always seen it in the context of statutory and non-statutory, or controllable and non-controllable. But I think it would be pretty common that you would look at line by line where the spend is going or being increased.
Yeah, I think there's another, to pick up on that point from John, there's another layer of detail below this paper that without doubt that I was debating whether we have it for the committee, but it would probably increase the size of the page to several hundred pages, and we decided not to spare ourselves the reading at this first look at it in this through this lens of statutory and non-statutory this time. But no doubt as we come to the budget later in the year, maybe that, or maybe some elements of that might be helpful as we think about what savings and what opportunities there are out there. I wanted to just really understand, and there's already been a question on it, table 1, the uncontrollable expenditure in grey. Why is it uncontrollable? What is it? It's not under your control as an executive directorate, or?
Yes. So it's the corporate overheads that are, obviously agreed centrally in the resources structure, which are then recovered from across the organisation. So there are a very complex model that does that, but there are sort of various drivers that would tend to use. The number of FTE is the main one these days because of so much remote work and all that kind of stuff, sort of square footage is less relevant. But this basically apportions out the cost of finance department, the legal department, HR, IT, facilities, buildings, all of those sort of central costs, in order that you get a better sense of what the full cost of that service provision is, with all the support that sits around the frontline service delivery.
So are you saying if we turn to page 40 of the paper, and I mean, this is not a deliberate choice, it's just because it illustrates the point. The first non-statutory arts development and support, 72k corporate budget, 206 controllable, no income, net controllable expenditure 278. So if we did away with that altogether, which we theoretically could do because it's not statutory, what happens to that 72k? Does it disappear altogether, or does it get reapportioned amongst it?
Reapportioned, it's just across a smaller base.
Right, but presumably there's a point when that sort of 72, or the equivalent to the 72, doesn't start to
Yes.
It's not as simple as saying you can't outline the 72, there's the 206 goes, but
Yes, sadly not. So I think if the council was to move in the direction of significantly reducing services, it would be able to reduce the cost of the back office, reduce the HR function, reduce the finance function, and the overall, overhead budget would fall. But there's not a sort of direct relationship between one team and the back office support that exists.
right, so if you've got a whole line from here, you lose the blue and the red.
Yeah.
But not the grey.
No, not unless there are a significant number of lines disappearing, at which point obviously one would cut one's back office off accordingly.
I understand, that's very helpful in understanding it. Well, I think there's obviously another layer of detail below this, and we've got the budget later in the year, but I thought this was a very helpful introduction to the subject, and clearly we have some significant cost pressures this year, and the transformation programme has been expanded to another 2 or 3 different areas, including the one I was asking for in the OSC last year, which is what areas can we stop doing it together, or whether obviously that's a choice. If we stop doing something, or reduce it together, as opposed to just salami slicing.
One of the programme areas is service reviews, so Bernie Flaherty is leading on that one, and that's where those questions will be asked.
Well, but I'm personally very much welcome that review, because I've been asking for it in the committee as the previously member for finance. We know because I've asked you a question at every meeting, I think last year. So I wish you good luck with that process in the executive directorate, and we'll return to the subject of the budget. Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, could I ask something that's come up with the discussion just now?
Very briefly, Dory.
One thing is, what do you mean by actually something's puzzled me? I mean, I know it's the smallest borough, but is it by area or by population?
In London, I have to check that, I don't quite remember, I think both in London.
As a borough, I think the city of London's much smaller, but
Yeah, the normal boroughs.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the
By population.
Population and area is fine. I'd have to-
And the other one was what you talk about the cost saving. Do we save a lot by cooperating with Westminster? And in that context, did Hammersmith and Fulham leaving us raise our costs?
I think they're for more corporate questions, I'd have to refer to the colleagues on.
thanks very much. Maxine and Mary.
You could summon Maxine and Elizabeth. Discuss it.
Yeah, I don't think we'll do that in this committee, but it's a very good question. We can come to the next open scrutiny committee, Dory, and ask if them the floor if you wish.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we move on to the committee to what are we on the work programme, item 6. There's really two things I want to two subjects. The first one is that we do have a working group going on, which is hanging over from last year into this year, majority of work this year. And that is a really important piece of work for the committee sponsoring that during the year. I know we'll get a full report in the January meeting. But Sam, do you want to give us an update on where you've got to so far?
Yes, we've met once. We meet again in 2 days' time for the second time. The first was scoping out, because it was a very brief description that we had in the main committee to scope out what we would do at working group with officers, where we could find more data that would support evidence to challenge. And officers have provided quite a bit of information that we will review, and we can work out where to focus our efforts on, because we have a lot of separate lines of inquiry that were set up, and we will focus on those that are achievable in shortest order, and then can report back so this committee can see what they make of it and see if any other lines need to be pursued.
Thanks very much. Are there any questions for Sam, particularly for those who are not on the working group? No, great. Okay. And then the next final business is the work programme for the main committee, pages 46 and 47. I think very helpful, Ben. Thank you for setting them out like that. These are the items that came in from members of the and got sifted by those of us who were at the internal working group at the beginning of the month. And they divide into 9 different subject areas. Does anybody think that doesn't accurately reflect the sort of subject matters that we ought to be focusing on? First question.
I would just add in 4.4 on planning that things may change because of government proposals. And government proposal is that planning decisions may be taken in a very different way. And it would be interesting at some point to hear how this council is going to respond to the consultation.
Yes, that would be, in which case we would have to do that pretty at the next meeting if we were to do that, because the consultation closes at the end of July.
Yeah. So someone would be writing a response. I don't know whether it makes, I mean, maybe it's a broader issue than just this committee. It's probably going to be a broad interest. It's being talked about in the press, but we don't have a briefing of what our officers might respond to.
Yeah, also, yes, I mean, on the flooding risk, I mean, I think we sort of waited to hear what Thames Water's basically funding round was going to give us. And I mean, we now know that they've run out of money, they're not going to do anything else. I suppose, I mean, I just put it high on the list because it's always, it's always on my mind. But I'm still always trying to get an update from James as well. he's rather stymied in what he can and can't respond to, partly because of the terms. But there's a lot in there about, yeah, I mean, what to do given, frankly, all the stuff which is Thames Water's responsibility. They just apparently can't do. So you know, what do we do? So that's I suppose a point of emphasis on, you know, given their frankly fallen completely short of what are their admittedly very strangely and vaguely worded statutory responsibilities, you know, what can be done in the absence of them stepping up.
Thank you, Toby. I didn't see, is it number 6 priority, or indeed not the budget is number 9 priority. I think it's just
That's
more of a list of things with the number next to them. And I think, however, we will have to probably make some choices, James, because we've got 4 after this meeting. We've got 4 main committee meetings, and well, I mean, obviously, to me, 1, 2, and 3 probably belong together, and they're possibly even combinable, or to a certain extent, 1 and 3 are certainly combinable into a single paper. Planning, I mean, that's an extra element on it, but whether we might even want 2 pages, because planning enforcement is a different subject from responding to the government's consultation, and that might be 2 pages. And on policy and strategy, we're just going through this policy and strategy. Last year, we agreed that the culture plan, should it appear in the year, would be done out of committee. Are we all happy with that? If the culture plan appears, that we don't devote committee in-person time to it. The other one on that statement of licensing policy, the timeline to do that would require an extra meeting in October. And I'm personally in 2 minds about whether that's needed or not, because I'm not sure how contentious the statement of licensing policy actually is. It normally isn't. I've seen the new draft and I didn't see much in it that was wildly different from normal. But I think what we need to perhaps do is wait and see what the public consultation produces, and if it produces a lot of comments. And
I think with licensing, I'm because I haven't seen it, so it's more about I think people are there is some concern about, you know, if it's essentially foregrounding, you know, stuff that isn't necessarily a licensing aim, like getting the nighttime economy going and all that kind of stuff. And I think that those are the issues of emphasis that come up with the new. I don't know because I haven't seen it. I just know that those are things that sort of casually come up when we're speaking in licensing committees amongst ourselves. You know, are we being too harsh on this operator or the other on the base? And the fact that the hospitality industry is, you know, suffering and continues to suffer quite a bit. So that's the thing. I would. That's all I'm thinking about. I don't know what my view is on it yet, but what I'm thinking about is if it could become contentious if it ends up representing a move sort of more in favour of operators and maybe less less concerned with, you know, coming down hard on those operators that have a lot of complaints and so forth. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I can see where that could go, and having read it, it does talk about a private nighttime of the economy or something like that, but then it doesn't. The substance of the changes are either, in my view, in my opinion, either beneficial or completely innocuous.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that would change the character of the borough radically into something that looked like Soho used to be years ago. But I think perhaps my suggestion to the committee is we wait and see what's come back from the public after the consultation's finished, and then if there's a lot, then it would be worth a special meeting in October.
Yeah.
But if the public don't come back very much, I'm not sure that we should necessarily spend an extra evening up here talking about something.
Or if it's not something we can do, we can
Exactly.
come back, but yeah, they might not like something that can't change the law.
Yeah, if it's
Actionable.
if it's actionable, then yes, I think that would be worth the meeting. Market's plan would be our choice on timing. Cemetery strategy, that's a key decision, so I think we have to do that in September to fit in with the timetable for the key decision as the consultation closing in to the end of August, but something like that that fits in with September meeting. Funding we've already said is a priority. TFL, it worked rather nicely having in the committee in March and probably doing the same thing this year if we can do it and having a council update.
I was going to say that's so valuable because they're so important. We have so many questions. It's the only chance of getting a face-to-face answer.
Yes.
And the budget is set in tablets of stone in the timetable. So my suggestion is we give this to James to have a look at and fit in what he can. Now, James, what do you reckon is the art of the possible in terms of fitting? Do we have to make some choices now on cutting something out?
I don't think you'll need to make choices now, but I do agree. I think it's very important to have finding reports. So I think it's mentioned about having a yearly instant TFL coming in. I think that's a very good idea. The only quick point I'd make as well, Councillor Benson mentioned flooding risk and Thames Water. It's part of the committee's statutory responsibilities that it can require Thames Water to come in to supervise flooding risk management a lot. So we would ask them to come to the meeting.
Please. I think we'll do that.
Yeah.
We're going to do the subject. We can do it properly.
Might get some public audience.
Ringham.
Well, I'm sure we get some public audience. So yes, we will. If we're going to do that, well, that could be a much better special meeting with the licensing policy because last time we had Thames Water, admittedly, it was in the aftermath of floods 2021, and we had it in the council chamber, and then we had a very large number of people there, and it was it was a very lively meeting for very good reasons. So
I was going to say we also have a flood officer.
yes,
James.
Yeah. And I don't know whether he can be made to appear in public as well. He might benefit from hearing people in reality.
James is great. He like I say, he's just held up so much by stonewalling from Thames Water. Over the last few years, to start the meeting with them, they'll take 18 months to get back to them.
So that is opened up in the public.
He's well up for that. Yes, constantly.
well, perhaps we have an update and think about that anyway and see if that might be a good use of time. To do our statutory scrutiny, which last year we did on a reactive basis. Unfortunately, there weren't any floods in the last municipal year, but so we hope that's still the case in this municipal.
Just my flat because of the emergency repairs deciding to install a pipe into nothing, but that's a whole other story. That's a story. Very important.
James, have you got enough guidance to sort of start off and put a structure together on that? I mean, we've been all over the place there on that discussion.
Yeah, no, I'll put together a structure based on the discussion. I think trying to theme the meetings works quite well. So I noticed quite a lot of interest from members about planning issues as well this year, as well as road safety, transportation. So because I think that makes for a stronger meeting. So I'll put together a draft and circulation.
I think that was what I was always saying that. Is there any other business that you need to discuss? And there. No. Anything else? Good for our meeting is closed at
It's actually